Hello everyone, welcome in this new recording. As you can see on the current display, today we are going to talk about ocean rendering. This is the latest component that I've been trying to implement in the NervLand project. Took me a pretty long time and well, it's actually not completed yet, but the results are already pretty interesting from my perspective, so I thought it would be a good idea to make a video about that, because otherwise I'm going to lose track of what I should mention, because there will be too many things. There is already too many things to discuss. But anyway, where should we start? As you can see here, we have the lighting working somewhat properly for the ocean. Oh, and actually the first thing I should maybe mention is that the ocean implementation is again coming from the ProLand project, and there was a paper dedicated to the realistic ocean rendering and lighting from Eric Bulletin again. So I took this as a reference, in fact, and I didn't really change anything. I mean, I changed one thing. And here is the paper, in fact. Pretty tricky, pretty complex to understand, and I probably should not go into too much details for the moment, but in case you're interested, that's where you should go. So what I was saying is that the lighting for the ocean is interacting properly with the sun and the sky. I mean, almost properly, because I think I messed something up and it's not absolutely correct when I'm changing the sun position. I think I'm not quite sure, in fact, so maybe it is not that bad. Currently I'm trying to, I can control the sun position with lat and long coordinate for the sun itself. So if I try to move the sun, you can see that I'm getting in day mode, so you have more daylight reflection on the ocean surface itself, and the higher you go, the more diffuse the lighting will be. And what I'm not very convinced about is this white coloring in the distance. I think that should not be so white. I still need to work a little bit on that, and yeah, there are still a lot of issues, in fact, and one of them I can demonstrate here. It's because of the projection that we have for the ocean. The projection, I mean, there's the kind of grid, vertex grid, which is in camera space at start, and then you're going to project that grid on the ocean surface, displace those vertices, and eventually move those vertices back into camera space. So yeah, when I do that, there's something messed up here. And in fact, this is coming from the only real change I made in the algorithm itself, because the implementation that I use as reference was providing this ocean grid in camera space when you're close to the ground, something like under 20 kilometers of altitude, and when you go above this limit, it's going to use a different lighting model. But what I did instead was to find a way to use the grid all the time, so you don't see that here, and I don't have a mechanism to display it, but there is actually a grid which is just mapped to the part of the earth which is visible here, and it's going to adapt to the earth shape from wherever you are in space. And of course, saying like that, there's nothing to really see here, but anyway, trust me, there is such a grid. And yeah, another thing that I have added also compared to the reference implementation is the effect that you have here. For instance, you can actually see through the water, and you can get part of the terrain under the sea surface visible from some distance when there's not too much water on top of it. So the lighting is not very intense here. Let's move somewhere else. Okay, here you can see, for instance, that around this rock or small island, there is some part of the terrain under the water surface which is still visible if you don't go too far away. But the further you go, the less visible this terrain becomes, obviously, because you're going to scatter the light in all directions, so you get no visibility at some point. What is cool also is that we can actually go under the water surface, but currently I am not rendering the water surface itself when we are under sea level, so you actually get a weird effect, which is that you don't see the water surface. Yes, there should be something that prevents you from seeing the mountains and everything. This is still to be implemented, but yeah, at least we have the terrain itself, which is cool. It means that if I really want to, I could maybe build something underwater at some point. We'll see. Here is another example, for instance, where you have part of the terrain under the water, which is a bit visible. Even if there's no highland, this spot is high enough to get some rocks. The rocks are not that nice. I need to change that somehow, but there is something at least. And yes, I also need to add more entries here to control the water surface itself, change the intensity and everything, the sea color and stuff like that. But this is still to be implemented at some point. So yeah, this is it. What should I mention about that? Yeah, let's have a look at a few of the recordings I made at the start when I was trying to display the ocean. So this is the first result that I got trying to display the grid itself. I was just trying to print the pixels with red, but completely messy. And this was the next step when I was also using the grid above the altitude limit of 20 kilometers. It's producing something wrong above that altitude, but at some point you see that it's snapping onto the Earth's surface, and this was the original implementation. So yeah, it was just snapping when you have the horizon of the Earth covering the complete horizontal field of view. So that version here was nice and working good. Next, here I was trying to display the vertices with the fast Fourier transform textures, and so you could see that there was indeed some kind of wave effect. So after that, I was trying to remove those red display and use actual colors for the ocean, but it didn't look very nice either. So this is the first kind of result, if you could call that a result, that I got. And in theory, it should have produced a usable result at that point, but it was not the case. Too bad. And I think it's at that point, in fact, that I decided to, well, investigate more carefully what was wrong with my ocean algorithm implementation. And to do that, I needed the sources to compile the reference version. This also took me a significant time, but in the end, what I did was to compile the awk and ProLand library from the sources completely. So I'm thinking I'm probably going to make a dedicated video about that, how to compile awk and ProLand. But just a quick preview, maybe when doing this compilation, I could then get this Ocean 2 example, which is using the FFT algorithm, and if you run that, it's going to display you the example that is provided from the original ProLand library. And you can hear how is it working again. Yeah, you can turn around like that, move the sun and zoom in. Okay, so you can see in fact that here there's no real lighting because we are too high and we are above this limit altitude, and when you get under the limit altitude you see the sun reflection, and then when you keep zooming in you get the sun displayed properly. So yeah, this is working fine, and since I could compile the sources for this example, I could also perform some different experiment and retrieve some of the textures that were generated dynamically, write them to the hard drive, and then compare that with what I was generating on my side. And this is how I actually built a complete unit test to figure out what was wrong in my implementation. And I eventually figured out that in my FFT texture computation, at some point I was missing a factor like 2 times pi or something like that, and this was messing everything up. Or maybe there was additional stuff, I don't really remember about that. Anyway, after fixing that, the display started to look much better, so it was actually starting to look like a real ocean. But I had this kind of issue initially where the part that was not on the ocean was still moving, and I had those blue lines in the distance plus artifacts in the shore here where you have this blue color leaking from the terrain. And when I was going in space, everything was getting in even worse because I was getting fighting artifacts between the ocean surface itself and the terrain underneath. And during my test I also got some very strange artifacts and issues sometimes, like this black bar was following the camera and I had no idea where this was coming from, but never mind. And this is, for instance, when I was first trying to use my home mechanism to displace the vertices in the camera space. So I was just using a red color to display this surface in that case, so you could see here it was matching the earth shape, but my initial implementation for that high-level grid was incorrect, because then the computation that I was doing for the lighting was completely messed up because I was not providing the same inputs for the algorithm anymore, so that wasn't good. So I tried a completely different solution, and I got this kind of result initially, trying to match the earth surface, but it was not really matching and completely messed up again. Yoo-hoo! But eventually things started to get a bit better, even if we still had this blue color leaking from the terrain underneath. I was starting to get an appropriate display from space or from a close view for that ocean, apart from this issue that I already mentioned. So it was pretty good already from my perspective. Now, one thing I would really like to add also is a better display around the shore like that. I mean, we really need to have foam and bubbles and some kind of white coloring when you have those waves at the border on the beaches. But I think this is going to be a bit tricky again, so not quite sure yet how I can do that. I need to think about it. Anyway, this is it for the moment. As usual, if you have any question, let me know in the comments. And as I said, I would keep working a little bit on this ocean display, maybe for the shore part and also the underwater part. It would be cool if we could still see the ocean surface when you're in the sea, but this might take a while again. So yeah, thanks for watching and see you next time. Bye bye.